Well, hello and welcome back to the Commonplace. I am just getting settled here with some books because today for the Home Librarian series, I wanted to do a slight spin to answer a question that ends up in my inbox or my messages somewhat regularly. And it's a funny question because ultimately it boils down to, how did you learn to think the way you do? And it's a fun question and one that I try to answer by leading people through my own literary life, because the way I think has been shaped and molded most primarily by the way I read. I am not someone who had a family past that I got a lot of great inspiring ideas from and that I wanted to copy and imitate when I had kids. And so I've been forced to turn towards books, and particularly feminine characters in books, for inspiration about how I want to mother and how I want to live and how I want our home to be. And books are really good for that. And so I thought maybe I would share one idea that I recently had and kind of walk through the books that helped me create it, how I kind of came to it, and maybe it'll be a fun one that you want to use with your family, and maybe it won't, because that's kind of the point here. The way ideas turn and move in my mind is going to be slightly different than the way they turn and move in yours, because you're a different person with different skills, gifts, deficiencies. We all have them. And also you have different kids and a different husband and a whole different life. So take the principles that you can from this example. Know that you do not have to do things the exact way I do them in my home. That's often why I stay with philosophy and ideas, so that you don't feel burdened to be like Autumn Kern, but instead rather to be inspired by the ideas that have inspired people for always, the living ideas, those that don't die. And so I'm hoping this will be helpful. I have more of a convivial bent. I'm a playful person. I can be firm. Ideally, I'd like to be like Mary Poppins, always kind, never cross, but very firm. I don't always hit that. I don't think anyone but Mary Poppins does. But that's a good little inspiring idea to hold in the balance there. And so because I'm a little more convivial, a lot of times my ideas will have a playful tone to them. And I've realized that sometimes is divorced from modern motherhood. People feel like they can't be having fun while teaching their children habits, or they can't be having fun while trying to maintain order. But I think you can. And I'm hoping that the Would-Be Good Chronicles, which is what we're going to talk about today, will be helpful. So just recently, like a lot of you I'm sure can understand, we just had a stretch with a lot of stinker attitudes going on. My husband was working a lot, and of course my kids feel that when they don't get a lot of dad time, because my husband's great, and so they feel the lack of that time and that presence. They were just kind of struggling. Summer's kind of different and crazy, and you're a little tired because you're in the creek all day, you're in the sun all day, all of that, right? But I was hitting a point where my own cheerfulness was seriously disappearing. And I kept thinking, this can't happen. I need to find an inspiring idea. I need to have a go-to. And so I always pull Little Men off the shelf. And I say always because over the last year and a half, I think I've read this nearly 4 times. So this is my go-to for my own inspiration in this season of life, because the work that the Bears do, Joe and her husband, the work they're doing in the home, Plumfield, that they have for these boys, this school, but also this home, is very much related to what I'm doing as a homeschool mother in this season of life. We're working on cultivating a lot of the same virtues. We have a lot of the same issues, a lot of the same personalities. And so the book is just like a dear friend to me in this season. And I think a lot of people actually think that. Every time I talk about Little Men, the comments flood in here or in Common House with like, yes, I'm reading it too. It's the most perfect book I've ever read. So I'm not the only one who thinks that. But there's this part in here where Jo has a book she keeps, and each boy has a page, and on it she will write the wins and the failures, the difficulties of the week. And then each Sunday she reviews it with them, and she'll say, I'm really proud of you for this, or I'm really disappointed in you in this. And the boys really take it to heart, right? Like every boy's really impacted and really formed by this practice. And those are the types of things I read where I think that would never work with my kids. Why? Because my kids are rightfully entitled to my love. They don't know a world without love. The boys in Little Men have had most of them have had really hard backgrounds. They've lost parents, they've been mistreated by parents, they've had to work, and they've had to work to get food because they're starving on the streets. So when they get to the Bears, they feel love and adoration and protection and safety for the first time, many of them. And so they feel a certain responsiveness and gratitude that I think children who have grown up with health and with love and with kindness and with steadfastness don't realize they could be living without. So my kids, if I were to read them a page from a book like that every Sunday, would be like, meh, okay, and move on. I don't think they'd be gutted like little Nat in Little Men, right? And so that is a great example of reading something in a book but not stealing it one for one. I cannot take Jo March's idea and just make it work in my home. But it was a seed idea. I have been thinking about this Sunday book for a year, how could I use something like this to draw my children's focused attention to what went well and what didn't? So I'm thinking about this. This is a couple weeks ago, right? I'm thinking about this. I'm still not able to piece how I could use this. I'm on the tail end of Little Men again. I feel like my own cheerfulness is waning. And then I decide, you know what? We need tea time. It's summer. Tea time's a little more spotty during the summer because we're out, a lot longer. It's sunnier, lighter, later. So we're not always home at 3 when we have tea time. And I think we need to have tea time. So I go and I set up and I'm gonna give them a killer tea, right? Like I'm amping myself up for the best tea time ever. And I light the candle and I go back into the kitchen to grab something and I came back out and I kid you not, those stinkers had blown out my candle. They had absolutely blown out my candle and I was about to throw in the towel of tea time. But if you've watched my tea time video or you've been with me in Common House for a long time, you know that I do not think tea time should be taken away as a disciplinary measure. Tea time is what you need when everyone's off course. You need that fellowship, you need that joy, you need the beauty, you need the inspiring ideas. So you cannot take away tea time. So I went back in, get my match, light it, go to put it on my candle, and all of a sudden I just think a bunch of would-be goods. And Would-be Goods is a title of an Edith Nesbit novel. And I'm just thinking about my children, how they so strongly wish to be good, but are so often very naughty. And that's pretty much what a would-be good is. And see, I like old books like Edith Nesbit, and I like books that speak to children the way C.S. Lewis does, because they show me that the inner world of a child is actually not setting out each morning to destroy your day. They're not trying to go get in trouble. They often think the thing they're about to do, even though to us it's so obviously naughty, to them, it might be fun. It might be an adventure. Their minds are just working in a different way, right? Oftentimes when you shout your child's name across the room, like, so-and-so, what are you doing? They're like totally pulled out of the eternally joyful moment they live in. And they're like, what happened? What'd I do? They're confused, right? And that's kind of the nature of the would-be good. And so for a split second, I thought of my children as would-be goods. And I thought about the book from Joe March, and I realized I need to tell them a story about a gang of rascals called the Would-be Goods. They've read the Would-be Goods. They know the book, but I just repurposed it for tea time that day. Now the last book that I'm pulling today is the Peter Rabbit, like Beatrix Potter, Complete Tales, because you have to have a proper name at tea time. You can't just be Mommy. Okay, lost my train of thought entirely because my brother-in-law was knocking on my front door. So basically, tea time names, right? Tea time names. So tea time, you cannot be your real name. I can't be Mommy, that's no fun. So ever since my kids were really little, we named ourselves the Society of Colonels Who Drink Tea. We bang on the tables, we yell hear hear when tea is in session. But then we needed proper names. And so we became variations of Beatrix Potter names. So we have Lord Tiggybottom and Lord Twinkleberry, Lady Flopsy, and Lady Tittlemouse. Yes, I am Lady Tittlemouse because I'm always going around cleaning things. So we have these names. So I decided to sit down and inform the lady and lords about this new gang of rascals in our area called the Would-be Goods. And I start telling them these stories that sound oh so much like some of the naughty things they had gotten into that week. But I'm doing the Joe March thing. I'm just doing it slant. I'm coming from the side. And so that almost allows a child to hear and see themselves in this different way. And my kids ate this up. They loved the Would-be Good tales. And so then I found my perfect combination of these 3 books. And so I give to you the Would-be Good Chronicles, the first 2 volumes, because that's as many as I've made so far. This is a grocery bag. So do not think that you need to have a certain socioeconomic status to buy very fancy printed heirloom quality materials so you can make something beautiful for your kids, because that is what the Charlotte Mason world online on Instagram, the aesthetics will tell you. It's not true. This is computer paper. This is a paper bag, and my kids love this thing. So the Would-be Good Chronicles became an idea. And in it, I write both a naughty and a good thing that each would-be good in our family does. And I have already seen the different way each child hears their good and their bad and tries to adjust from it. And it brings a lot of laughter to it. I think you can maintain levity with a child. I need to say now, I do not cover anything with my children from one direction. I actually talk about this in my Tale of Bren and Browen, which I recorded. I'll link it above. It's a story that I told my kids one day. We have ongoing stories about these characters named Bren, Browen, and Brashel. And those are not my children's names. So in it though, I talked about how I use story as one tool in my parenting toolbox. I also use habit training, like let's practice the right thing. I also use our home atmosphere. I also use the books I'm reading to them. I will tell them a story. I will give them an embodied way to play what I want them to do. There are so many ways that you teach a child. I never think you go from just one direction. So while I might be would-be gooding at tea time and reading them the tales of their own lives in funny ways so that they can see them with new eyes and hopefully learn from a slightly different, more playful direction. I'm also, when needed, reminding them that kernels speak what is true, good, and beautiful, that we don't name call. Like, if you name call, you get removed from this playtime. You know, there are things that are like that too. So I've had comments before where people wonder, like, oh, you're just making it fun, and shouldn't they know this is serious? And it's never just one way, but this is the fun way, thanks to the books, the way I've been doing it. So, for example, the stories are short. I draw little pictures. We have one here that says, Lady Flopsy seen stealing last drops of water from Lord Twinkleberry. Will he ever recover his twinkle? They laughed forever at that story. But also, Lady Flopsy remembered when Twinkleberry was crying and she took the last drops of his water bottle. This is a more inspiring way to come at these ideas. And this I stole from Jo March, Edith Nesbit, and Beatrix Potter. That's where I got this idea from. I am not some like magical unicorn of special fun ideas. This is how ideas work together. And so that's one of the super fun ones from the first one. Or I don't know if you have boys and if they argue about who is the police car that they see out on the road, but Tiggy Bottom and Twinkleberry, who is right? Who is the police car? There was a whole story, I wrote a whole story about that. In the second edition, we had, oh, Twinkleberry. I'll just read this one. This one's kind of funny. This really did happen. Twinkleberry, lord of infamous would-be-goods, would be good if he didn't have to smack all the bums. The reports are true. Lord Twinkleberry must smack every bum he finds, including Miss Sarah of Noldy Forest. Yes, the lord was seen repeatedly smacking the park ranger's bum. What will his mother do? That's a real story. That is a real story about a toddler in my house who, for some reason, thinks that he must smack bums when he walks by people. But that's one way I'm working on it. Like, these stories are just lighthearted. I have Duke, Ramos Duke. Would-be-goods, lady and lord, seen teaching Latin to any child willing to listen. Will they contribute to the enrichment of our cultural soil? Will they save the world? It's because my kids are teaching any child that will listen to them how to sing Row, Row, Row Your Boat in Latin. So, like, these are just funny things. It's a good way to connect with my kids at a low pressure time. I am trying to cultivate the virtues. I'm praising the good I've seen. I want them to know I see the good you are doing. And also, this was naughty and it went off course somewhere, and let's come at it this way with the stories. But it's the combination of 3 different books. And isn't that really fun? That books can give us, like, almost like breathe new life into our motherhood when we feel like, yeah, my cheerfulness is totally dissipating in this moment. It's been weeks of sibling fights, or it's been weeks of people whining about having to help around the house or doing the chores or going out in the public and people just running away from me or whatever it is. Those are the moments I think books can offer a lot if you're willing to take the characters you love and the characters you want to be like and try to pull their principle. If you're wondering how in the world you would even get started with something like this, I think the first thing to do is kind of note the book or the lady that you like best. Who is someone you really want to be like? And then study her. How does she respond in certain situations? I've talked about Swallows and Amazons. My kids love this series. Well, we've read the first 2, so they love the first 2. We will continue with the third one. And Mrs. Walker, the mother of the 4 children, well, there are 5, but there are 4 on the adventure. She has the best responses to everything. Her kids get shipwrecked. They literally sink the ship of the house from which they rent for the summer holiday, and also her kids are stranded on an island, and who knows, someone could have drowned, you know, all the things a mom would think of. Her reaction is so perfect. She always names the higher good. She's always looking for the virtue she can commend and cultivate. She never overreacts. She's never shooting from her hip. Yes, she is a fictional character, I understand, but she is an example to study. Jo March Bear, one of my favorite to study. Also, think of the ones you don't want to be like. If you don't want to be like, if you're a book glutton like I can be, and you can get lost in your books and completely ignore your children, remember Mr. Bennett from Pride and Prejudice. He's locked himself in his study and he's a terrible parent. But keep Mrs. Bennett in mind if you want to think of an excitable, gossipy, fretful type of woman and the impact she has in her atmosphere and in her children. So it's good to know both the good and the bad, but I think if you just start there, grab a book you love, a character you love, study them, and look for how does she bring life to this? How does she reveal things to the children she's speaking to? How does she build or cultivate a really healthy home? What are the things that she prizes? Where does her energy go? I know some people use Ma Ingalls or maybe it's Ma Wilder. I can't remember who has like Monday we wash, Tuesday we dry, that whole thing. They literally use the chore chart from the Little House books to keep themselves moving. Or one of my friends read Farmer Boy and loved the phrase, "I must fly," which Mrs. Wilder uses all the time. And she would just tell herself that, like, I must fly, like there's stuff to do and I need to do it cheerfully because it matters. And so use books to inspire yourself as a mother. I think they are far more helpful than something like social media. Social media, it's not a full idea. It's not given in its right form. There's also an element in which in a book, a woman is not perfect, right? She does struggle. She has to grow. She has to change. And if you've been following Jo March through Little Women into Little Men, then you know how much she's changed. And you know how much she's had to grow and how hard she's worked to do that. And so it's very different than like the perfect squares of Instagram where everything can be contained. You can set up a flat lay. You can train your kids to act a certain way. You can put them in certain clothes. It's just very different. So if you're a mom looking for inspiration about how to mother with a bit of conviviality or in a new inspiring way, I want to give you books. Look at books, study those women, and enjoy all of the fun and teaching, good teaching that comes out in your home. I'll see you next time.